My name is Sergeant Afi Labi. I am 36 years old. I have been a logistics and welfare sergeant for 9 years, and on a Wednesday morning in April, I was assigned to close out the personal effects of a soldier named Corporal Ernest Quaynor, who had died of a cardiac event at a forward support base 4 days earlier. This is a task I have done before. It is one of the quieter duties of welfare work. You go to the bunk, or the quarters, or the storage locker, you catalog what is there, you pack it carefully, you prepare it for return to next of kin, or, when there is no next of kin listed, for the institutional process that follows. Ernest Quaynor had no next of kin listed. That was the reason the task had come to me. I had not known Ernest Quaynor. His name was not familiar to me. He had been posted to this base 11 months ago. I had processed his arrival paperwork. His face, if I had passed him in a corridor, would not have stopped me. I went to his quarters on a Wednesday morning with a catalog sheet and 2 packing boxes and a job to do. The quarters were neat. Ernest had been a neat man. Everything in its place. A small shelf of books, a folded prayer mat, a photograph on the bedside table. I cataloged the books. I cataloged the prayer mat. I was reaching for the photograph when I saw the envelope beside it. The envelope was not sealed. It was old. The paper had yellowed at the edges. It had been folded and refolded many times, the creases soft with repetition. My name was on the front. Afi Labi. My name, my full name, in handwriting I did not recognize. I sat down on the edge of Ernest Quaynor's bed, and I held the envelope for a long time before I opened it. Let me tell you what I knew about Ernest Quaynor before I read the letter. Almost nothing. He had been 53 years old, 28 years of service, a career soldier who had moved through postings the way career soldiers do, steadily, without fanfare, accumulating service rather than rank. He had reached corporal and had remained corporal for 17 years, which is not a failure, but a choice. Some soldiers are climbers, some are lifers. Ernest had been a lifer. He had listed no next of kin on any form during his 28 years of service. No spouse, no children, no siblings, no parents still living. He had been, on paper, entirely alone. But he had my name on an envelope that he had been carrying, folded and refolded, for a very long time, and I had to read it to understand why.
The letter. 3 pages, handwritten. The date at the top was 20 years ago. I had been 16. I will not read you every word of it, some of it is mine, but the shape of it. Ernest had served alongside my father 25 years ago. They had been in the same unit for 3 years. They had been close in the way that soldiers become close, through proximity and difficulty and the particular trust that forms when you depend on someone in conditions that require dependence. My father had left the army when I was 7 years old. I had always been told he left because his service was complete, because it was time, because the family needed him home. Ernest's letter told me a different version of those years. My father had struggled after leaving. The transition from military to civilian life had been harder than he had anticipated, or admitted. There had been periods of darkness, periods where he had not been the father or the husband he had intended to be. He had told Ernest this, in letters, over years. And then my mother had left. I had been 16 when my mother left. She had packed her things on the Saturday in October, and she had hugged me for a long time, and she had said she was sorry, and she had gone. I had believed for 20 years that she had chosen to go, that she had decided the life we had was not the life she wanted, that she had left me and my father because something in us had not been enough. Ernest's letter told me something different. My father had asked her to go. Not because he did not love her, because he believed in one of the darker periods, in a moment of profound and mistaken certainty, that she and I would be better without him, that his instability was a danger to us, that the most loving thing he could do was to remove himself from the equation by removing her instead. He had told her this. He had asked her to leave and to let me believe it was her choice. He had believed that a clean break, a mother who had chosen to go, would be less damaging to me than a father who was falling apart. He had been wrong. Ernest had known this at the time. He had written the letter to tell me, and then he had not sent it.
The object at the center of everything was the letter itself. 3 pages, yellowed edges, soft creases. My name on the front, in handwriting I had not recognized. Ernest had explained in the letter why he had not sent it. He said he had written it in the belief that I deserved to know, that a 16-year-old girl carrying the weight of a mother's apparent abandonment deserved the truth that would lighten it. But he had not sent it because he had not been certain it was his to send. The truth in the letter belonged to my father and my mother. Ernest was its keeper only by accident, because my father had trusted him with it, and because that trust had implied a discretion Ernest had not known how to balance against my right to know. He had kept it for 20 years. He had been waiting, he wrote, for a moment that felt right, a moment when he could give it to me himself, when he could sit across from me and hand it over and be present for what followed. That moment had not arrived, and so he had carried it, through 20 years of postings and moves and a life largely lived alone, and it had come to me anyway, the way things come to us eventually, in the quiet of someone else's quarters on a Wednesday morning, when we are just trying to do a job.
I want to pause here. Because sitting on the edge of a dead man's bed, holding a letter he had written 20 years ago that contained the truth about the most painful thing that had ever happened to me, is not something I can move past quickly. I sat with it for a long time. I did not finish cataloging the room that morning. I called Lieutenant Colonel Vivian Obotu and told her I needed the morning. She gave it to me without asking for a reason, which is the kind of officer she is. I sat on Ernest's bed. I read the letter 3 times. And then I put it in my pocket, and I went outside and I sat on a bench near the parade ground in the April sun, and I thought about my father. If you have ever been handed a truth that arrived 20 years too late and 20 years right on time, drop a comment below. And subscribe right now, because what I did when I stood up from that bench and what happened when I made the calls I needed to make is the part that changed everything. My father, Emmanuel Labi, is 61 years old. He lives in a small house in Kumasi that he has lived in for 15 years. He is a quiet man now. He had a period of his life that was not quiet, and he came through it, and what was left was a quietness that I had always read as distance. I had not spoken to him about my mother in 20 years. Not because we did not speak, we spoke, regularly, about ordinary things. My work, his health, the neighborhood, the way ordinary conversations with parents accumulate into a relationship that is present and functional and somehow never reaches the things that matter most. I called him from the bench near the parade ground. He answered on the second ring. I said, "Dad, I need to tell you about a man named Ernest Quaynor." The silence on the other end of the line was not the silence of someone who does not know that name. It was the silence of someone who has been waiting for it. The conversation. I will not tell you all of it. That conversation belongs to my father and to me. What I can tell you is that he confirmed what Ernest's letter had said. He did not qualify it or revise it or soften its edges. He said it plainly, the darkness of that period, the mistaken certainty, the request he had made of my mother, the story he had wanted me to believe. He said he had believed it was the right thing. He said he had understood over the years that it was not. He said he had not known how to undo it, that the architecture of 20 years of silence had become a structure he had not known how to dismantle without destroying everything he had rebuilt inside it. Then he said, "How did you find out?" I told him about Ernest, about the Wednesday morning, about the envelope on the bedside table, about the name on the front in handwriting I had not recognized. My father was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Ernest kept it." Not a question, a recognition. I said, "He kept it for 20 years. He was waiting for the right moment." My father said, "That sounds like him." He said it in the voice of someone who has been giving back something they had already learned to live without.
My mother. Her name is Afi Labi. She kept his name. I had not known why. I understood now. She lives in Accra. I had seen her 3 times in 20 years. At my grandmother's funeral, at a cousin's wedding, once by accident in a shopping center when I was 23, and we had stood looking at each other in a cosmetics aisle for 30 seconds before she said my name and I said I had to go, and I went. I drove to Accra on a Saturday. I did not call first. I knocked on her door. She opened it. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped back and held the door open, and I went inside. We talked for 4 hours. She told me her side of it, the request my father had made, the reasoning he had given, the way she had honored it because she had believed, in her own grief and confusion, that he understood something about what was best for me that she could not see clearly enough to dispute. She said, "I have thought about that Saturday in October every day for 20 years. She said, "I thought about calling so many times. I put the phone down so many times." She said, "I did not know how to explain what had happened without explaining your father in a way that felt like a betrayal." I said, "He explained himself." She looked at me. I told her about Ernest, about the letter. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm glad he kept it." What happened in the months that followed? My father came to Accra in June. The 3 of us sat together for the first time in 20 years. It was not dramatic. It was not a resolution in any clean or sudden sense. It was 3 people in a room who had spent 20 years carrying versions of the same story and who were beginning, slowly, to compare notes. My father apologized, to her and to me. Not once, several times, in different ways on different days. The kind of apology that does not expect to fix what it broke, but that needs to be said anyway. My mother did not tell him she forgave him immediately. She told him she was working on it. That is the more honest thing, and she has always been an honest person. I am working on it too. What I can say is that the 3 of us have had dinner together twice, that my mother has called me on 4 Sundays in a row, that my father and I have had 2 conversations that went past the ordinary things and reached the things that matter most. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, a great deal.
Ernest Quaynor. I went back to his quarters after I had finished the call with my father on that Wednesday in April. I finished the catalog. I packed his things carefully. I prepared them for the institutional process that follows when there is no next of kin. I added 1 note to the file. It said, "Corporal Quaynor maintained personal correspondence over a 20-year period that has had significant welfare implications for serving personnel. His care and discretion in this matter are noted." It was the most I could put in an official document. It was not enough. Ernest Quaynor had carried a letter for 20 years because he had not known whose truth it was to tell. He had been wrong to keep it. I believe that now. I believe I deserved to know sooner. I believe my mother deserved not to have spent 20 years honoring a silence that had been asked of her in a broken moment. But I also believe he had kept it out of love, not the absence of courage. Love. The kind that waits and watches and carries what it has been given and hopes for the right moment. The right moment did not come while he was alive. It came on a Wednesday morning in April when I was just trying to do a job. The letter is in my desk drawer now. I have read it many times since April, not looking for new information, I have the information, looking at the handwriting, the way Ernest formed his letters, the care with which he chose his words, the date at the top from 20 years ago. He had been 33 when he wrote it. I am 36 now, 3 years older than he was when he sat down and tried to find the words for a truth that was not entirely his to tell. I think about that sometimes. I think about a 33-year-old man holding a pen over a piece of paper, trying to decide whether love or discretion should win. And I think about the fact that the letter reached me anyway, late, but complete. Here is what a Wednesday morning and an unsealed envelope taught me. The things people carry for us do not always arrive on time. Sometimes they arrive in the quiet of a dead man's quarters when we are just doing a job we have done before. Sometimes they arrive through the hands of someone who kept them because they loved us and did not know what else to do with what they had been given. And when they arrive, however late, however unexpectedly, through whatever chain of ordinary events brought them to us, we have a choice about what to do with them. I drove to Accra on a Saturday. I knocked on a door. I went inside. That was enough to start. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. She opened the letter. She read it all the way through. Then she picked up the phone.